if I wasn't curious, if I wasn't trying to poke the box, if I wasn't trying to find new ways to look at something or to learn. The primary reason I have my own podcast is it's a networking act. I reach out to executives and I got to have one-on-one time with them and pick their brain. And from that one call, and it generates into other things. I meet at the conferences, I reach out to them. Hey, I have a question. Can I ask you about this?
Welcome to Multifamily Excellence, the podcast that explores the ever-evolving world of the multifamily industry. I'm your host, Jonathan Treble. In each episode, I'll spend time with a world-class multifamily leader to learn how they're continuously pushing boundaries for excellence. You'll get to hear their perspectives on career progression, leadership philosophies, and strategies for operational excellence. Hello and welcome to another episode of Multifamily Excellence. This episode is brought to you by my company, With Me. With Me makes people's lives better every day through convenient, technology-enabled solutions for the multifamily apartment industry and beyond. Today, I'm excited to have Moshe Crane on the show, the most curious person in multifamily. In addition to being a curious person, Moshe is the VP of Branding and Strategic Initiatives at Sage Ventures, an owner-operator firm based in Maryland, serving the Baltimore-Washington corridor. Moshe is also host of the Curious Wire podcast, covering a curious journey for folks in the multifamily industry wanting to elevate their careers and challenge the status quo. Moshe, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Glad to be here, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Multifamily Excellence aims to uncover the unique stories from industry leaders. And so I'd like to go back with you to the beginning of your story in your career. How did you first get into multifamily? And if you want to even go back before then, where did you start your career in the very early days?
It's not the most exciting story. I'm some Jewish and Orthodox, and I went to a religious school. I got a degree through the religious school, a bachelor's in Talmudic law. And I went on an online master's program really just to say that I did that or to help me with getting a job. I like people. I thought I wanted to go into recruiting or something to do with HR. So I got a master's in organizational management. And I did an internship at a hospital in HR, and I thought it was the coolest thing. There was one, the recruiter for the hospital. We walked around. Everybody in the hospital knew him because he was the gateway for everybody that worked there. And so I thought that was really interesting. But I finished school, got married, went to work. It was 2010, and there wasn't a great market for HR jobs. So it took me a little while to find something. I had a few odd-end jobs. And then I decided I wanted to be intentional to look for something, and I was really interested in commercial real estate. And I went and reached out to a bunch of folks, met with a bunch of folks who were in the space, ended up getting a job through that, working for an owner-operator in the submarkets of DC, leasing office and warehouse space. And that opened up my mind because we dealt with a lot of different businesses. And that was really, really interesting. And I started becoming really curious. My job was to cold call and find companies that would be interested in leasing space from us. So I started to learn about different companies that we had, and I would use their name and learn that certain industries to kind of name drop to try to drum up business. I did that for a little while. It was fun. It was interesting. I learned a ton. I did have a long commute. I actually ended up getting fired, and I was looking for something different at the same time because it was a long commute. And I went to work for a supplier for a little while, and then I actually got some multifamily clients. And then I really wanted to get back into on the owner side. And Sage was growing at the time. They were 1,800 units. They had just created this position of director of leasing and marketing. And I thought it would be a stepping stone. It would help me get a bigger job at a bigger company. And I got here, and it was there was so much to do, and it was so fascinating. And I didn't get a lot of direction. And so I really leaned into my curiosity. I wanted to learn more, understand more. And the more I did that, the more value I was able to add. And the rest is history from there.
Okay, got it. So you worked on both sides, on the operating side and also on the supplier side. And like many of my guests on the show who have risen up to, executive levels at companies, you started in leasing. So you were cold calling, and that's a little bit of a different leasing experience than many of the guests we've had on the show. The traditional leasing agent, runs tours, gets people to sign and take on residential leases. You were actually proactively reaching out to businesses. Are you glad you started in a role like that? Did that give you some skills that you still use today?
Yeah, I mean, it taught me a lot about business in general because, again, I had to deal with a lot of different business types. It was a great learning experience. I think the ability to cold call is a competitive advantage. Is a great tool. I still do it now. Just there's so many good reasons to do it, even if you're not feeling anything. Just to be comfortable with reaching out to folks that you don't have a connection to, calling, emailing, even LinkedIn, creating a whole sequence of how to get in touch with people. It's good. So it's a great skill. And yeah, I learned a lot about business and I like to know things about, I don't need to know everything about specific industries or specific businesses, but knowing enough that I don't want to say be dangerous, but I could have a more than surface level conversation. So, being able to talk to people in the office space or retail space or industrial space, because I've had that experience it has served me well.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with you. I started my career in a job that involved a lot of cold calling, and the different things you learn from that, besides the education about different types of prospects, but the mental hardness you have to learn, the ability to deal with rejection, I think can go far and take you far in your career. You and
Well,
you
I'll tell
did.
you one thing, what it was very satisfying coming to multifamily because when I would cold call these businesses, you would get a hold, like it took a long time to get a hold of the CEO and you finally did. And it's like, oh, we just signed a 10-year lease. We have 9 more years to go. And it's like, oh man, can I call you in 8 years and put it on the calendar? In multifamily, everybody has an expiring lease.
That's true. Yeah, a very different sales cycle. You went on the vendor side, selling, I believe, waste management services and rental equipment.
So yeah, so there's the waste industry is an interesting place. And I had a buddy that was working at this company, and when we would rent, so we had office space that was full service, so tenants didn't have to worry about their trash, and then there were also like select industrial space where they just pay for the space and their electric and their trash was separate. They were responsible for that. So there were times where I would refer business to this friend of mine, whether in that company they were a trash hauler, but they also did brokering. So trash industry can be a little shady. So people don't really pay attention to their bill. They don't understand their bill and their fees and things that can be placed in there. And then customers don't know it all. And so they were essentially a consultant brokers. They would go and they had relationships with different haulers and so you could do this nationally. So when I was out of a job and I was talking to them about how they could like expand their business with real estate companies, they recruited me and said, "Hey, we want you to come join us." And I started, and there was like everybody has trash. So like, where do you even begin? So I started just with like a real estate mindset. So retailers, franchisors, companies that had multiple locations, and then I started. And at the time, I didn't have much to do with multifamily. I thought I would never want to be in multifamily because when you have office and industrial space, you're not dealing with people's lives. You're not dealing with people's homes. It's not as hands-on or as intense as multifamily. These are people's homes. And so I didn't think I would want to go into that, but I started getting customers that way and I started kind of learning that business. And in terms of expenses, their trash expenses, very minimal to their total expenses, but you want to be responsible for everything you're doing. And, the operators of real estate are not usually experts in trash. So it became like a little interesting niche to start to grow that. And then like you get a customer and then they start buying more properties and they start coming back to you. It was interesting. And I was like, I'd rather be on the real estate side than on the trash side.
I see a pattern already in your early career. You frame yourself as the most curious person in multifamily. I've listened to your podcast. I can see the wide range of guests. You certainly seem to be curious. How much do you credit your curiosity for leading you to where you are now in your career? or how much do you credit other skills like hard work, networking, things like that?
Well, I think they go together. If I'm not a good personality to sit at my desk with my head down and just do what I'm told, that's difficult for me. I pick my head up, I look, I wonder, I question, I say, hey, what's this, what's that? If I wasn't curious, if I wasn't trying to poke the box, if I wasn't trying to find new ways to look at something or to learn. I mean, the primary reason I have my own podcast is it's a networking act. To reach out to executives and I got to have one-on-one time with them and pick their brain. And from that one call, and it generates into other things. I meet them at conferences. I reach out to them. Hey, I have a question. Can I ask you about this? And it become a huge competitor. I'm not competitive advantage because I'm not competing against anybody, but it's a great resource to be able to reach out to high level folks and find out what are you doing about this or what are you doing about that. And then it's fun to also be able to give value. Like we're not a huge company, but to talk to operators that are much larger than us and be able to share things that we're doing that they weren't even.
Let's jump into the podcast and talk about it more now that we're on the topic. You've had remarkable success with it. You are almost at 100 episodes. Your 99th one was published last week. Congratulations. And you've been only doing it for a little more than 2 years since your first episode. So that's an incredible clip for any podcast. Tell me more about the strategy of it. And first of all, did you have a defined strategy besides what you said about networking at the very early days? So has the strategy evolved over time?
Maybe a little bit, but not. I don't think so. At first, it's really hard to grow a podcast. I think in the first episode, like shared what my goals were using OKRs, and hopefully by the time this is published, episode 100 and further will be published. But the episode 100 is going to be sort of like I failed, and I'm fine with that because I started off with I created this objective that I was hoping to impact people in their career, and the key results were 1,000 people who were regular listeners. And so some of the things that I'd stuck with, I kept the episodes shorter. Sometimes they get closer to 30 minutes, but I keep them. Most of them are under 25. And actually I've gotten some feedback recently from people I didn't know were listening, and they're like, thanks for keeping these on the shorter side. They work perfect on my commute. And so yes, that's what I was, I'm doing differently when I started, and still like, I don't do this elaborate introduction, tell us your story. It was really, I want to hit on specific things, like either something you're really passionate about or something unique about your company. When I started, I did have a fair amount of suppliers, but with them, I didn't talk really so much about their business. It was really just a different angle, whether it was a leadership thing or a marketing thing or, someone who switched from the operator side to the supplier side and telling that story and their advice. So and suppliers usually are pretty happy to jump on a podcast. So I gained some traction from there. I did start doing some solo episodes. I haven't done one in a little while. I think number 100 is going to be a solo episode talking about how, I failed, but I'm more than happy with that. At the beginning, for a long time, I was using somebody on Fiverr to kind of edit. I got a different thing. I'm now doing it myself. There's nothing fancy. I don't do anything, elaborate, but it's momentum. It's reaching out to a lot of people. That's the biggest hurdle, scheduling people. And so I would go in these waves. I started with a lot of momentum, and the momentum would go down, and then momentum would pick up, and you see these waves. And grateful that the last several months have been in an uptick, and it's fun.
Now, did you do this in conjunction with a strategy at Sage Ventures and your peers there, or was this a side project, and have those worlds converged somewhat?
So it's a side project, which I was very transparent with, and I have the green light to be doing that. A side thing, my initial thought was, hey, I'll get sponsors and make a little on the side. And right away I was like, no, I don't want any sponsors because I want to say what I want to say. I don't want to pander to anybody. I don't want to have to, answer to anybody. I want it to be unfiltered. Not that I'm talking about such controversial things, but that was my first thought. I've gone back and thought about doing sponsorships, so we'll see where that goes. But with the company, it's helped a lot because I've grown. I mean, my network is helping the company. So I started with the president a quarterly executive networking meeting So I have other executives from other management companies in our area, and we get together quarterly, and that's growing. And this is like, the more that I'm out there and I can have conversations and meet people when we have issue, I don't want to say an issue, but like we want to know about something, like they're often coming to me and say, hey, can you ask some of these CEOs in your network, what are they doing about this? So I've been able to use what I'm doing here or with my podcast and build the network and connections to help our business. Just as a funny story, the owner is in Israel for the summer, and he sent the picture on a group chat. He's wearing a Sage polo and a Sage hat. And he said somebody stopped him and asked him if he's from Baltimore. And the person said, oh, I am familiar with Sage. I know Moshe Crane. And this is, they're telling the owner, which is pretty funny.
Yeah. So and I noticed on LinkedIn, your title at Sage changed last year. You were VP of marketing. Now you're VP of branding and strategic initiatives. So did the podcast help you create maybe a unique role here where you're leveraging that officially?
Not necessarily the podcast, but in general, the posting on LinkedIn and putting myself out there. The company turned to me and said, hey, there was a mutual thing. I wanted to expand what I was working on. I was just focused on leasing and marketing. And so now I work directly with the president, and, we built out reporting for expenses and maintenance, and we have initiatives in all different categories. So it's really fun to be involved in so many different, my job is to try to find how we can get better. And being public has helped, definitely benefited the company. There are suppliers who have given us better deals on pricing for things because of that.
Makes sense. It makes total sense. I had Tony Sousa on the show recently, and same thing happened with him around the same time, where RPM turned to him and said, hey, why don't we create a unique role for you and make, it's synergistic. Now RPM is a third-party manager, and I understand Tony's goals. You're an owner operator. Besides getting better deals from vendors, what else does your visibility help your firm with? Is it deal flow when other owners want to transact? Is it something else?
I also run the company's LinkedIn, so I can't say specifically because of the podcast, but our LinkedIn presence, we've had companies we reached out to and that's where the cold calling is, the VP of acquisitions will say, hey, we're interested in this property. We don't have any connections there. Can you reach out to them? And, they see who we are, and they're like, you guys look legit. We're happy to talk and jump on the phone. It's helped a ton for recruiting. People, see us and say, this is a place I want to work, and join from that. So that's been very beneficial. Other things that's affected, deal flow, it's hard, I can't necessarily say that specific, but, right now, my vision for the next 2 years is I want to build a census program for me. So we can hire people with no experience. We could train them, and then we could place them within our portfolio. And to me, that's the golden goose that lays golden eggs. But that's a pain point, I think, for most. And so I just had a guest, the CEO, a company, Pervert Communities in Pennsylvania, and they successfully done this. They're much bigger than us. And so now there's this conversation hey, can I come up to your office? Can we spend some time? I really want to figure out what you guys are doing and how we can do something similar.
Yeah, it's brilliant. That makes total sense. And
on the reverse, it's starting to come back. I had a CEO that was on the podcast on the West Coast that is looking at a supplier that used our logo in their pitch deck and wanted my take on it. And they're much bigger than us. So it's nice to be able to, I'm not just trying to take value, have it come full circle and be able to position our company or myself as someone who would also give back.
Yeah, the benefits to an online presence, whether on LinkedIn, which you have 18,000 followers, or on your podcast, close to 100 episodes, the benefits to me are pretty obvious. I think a lot of people don't see the value, or they can't connect the dots, or they think that folks are in it for maybe self-serving reasons or ego. I think you posted something to that extent, shortly after NAA. A lot of people don't understand the end goals that we're going after here. Was there anything? Is there any other you think strategy here? Any other end result that, and it could be 5-10 years down the road, that you're personally looking forward to, that continuing to grow your audience will lead you to?
I hope that it attracts more talent for our company. I don't have a 5-10 year plan of what that what other benefits are, but there are things that I'm trying to build for a company. There's an initiative for leasing. There's different stages, steps that I'm trying to, I like to use the word centralize, but how to make it easier for our on-site teams. And to have other executives that I can throw this idea at them and get their feedback on it. And like the maintenance initiative, like
Right.
I don't know a lot about maintenance, but I know that it's really important. So I'm going to go find somebody else who can help me with this. And if there are other things that come up, like there's so many categories, there's so many variables, so many nuances to our business that it's impossible to know everything, but I want to know the people for each category so that I can ask.
Right. And it must be rewarding too, just knowing that your content is helping people, right? I'm sure you've gotten great feedback from listeners. And at this point, can you share any KPIs or stats about the podcast listenership on your show?
It's not, if you're doing this to try to build it's hard. When I look it up, total downloads, I think I'm at full time. I use Buzzsprout. At this moment that we're recording, I'm at 6,500 total downloads. So I don't know what that comes out as, like an average of 60 or so, 70 per episode. So there's some episodes that get obviously more than others. I actually think that I'm starting to do more of this where I actually cut. So the whole thing is audio, but I do it on Zoom, and then to cut up like small video clips and then post it. So I guess that this will all be public when this is published, but I created a LinkedIn page for the podcast. Then I like posting so much about my podcast from my personal page. I created a page where I'm going to start putting out clips for episodes from old ones, current ones, and so forth. So that's the podcast page. So it's a place where I can publish them, because I think that the little nuggets, little clips that you get, I mean, you see it everywhere. Short form video is the only thing that can work on all platforms.
Right. Are you thinking about other platforms too, besides LinkedIn? I know you have a huge following there. Have you thought about short form platforms?
I mean, in theory, yes, but I don't want to be on any of these platforms. I am thinking maybe one day of like YouTube or something, but I do. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes with the LinkedIn page, where I start pushing like these short clips from the podcast, where I think people will get value from those clips, and more people are going to just be interested in watching the short clip versus the whole episode. But hey, the more people who see the short form clips, the higher chances there are that some of those people will convert into listening to a longer episode. And it's funny, like you'll see like an episode will come out, and then all of a sudden you'll see this big spike in your stats, and you'll see like all these old episodes get one download. So somebody came in and they listened to several different episodes. So yeah, I mean, you don't know. I can tell you that most people are listening on their iPhone. More people are doing it on Apple Podcast than on Spotify. It's hard to really tell exactly who. I can't tell who. There's some like funny locations too, like global, internationally, that it's like, we're listening to this. But yeah, no, it's very cool when people reach out and say that they've been listening to it. I did a bunch of solo episodes about leasing, and I'll get a message every once in a while, but hey, I listened to this and I used what you did and it worked. It was great. It's very beneficial.
I imagine a lot of people listening to our show, and my audience is multifamily professionals. A lot of people are looking to grow in their career and make it to the VP or higher level, like you have. What would you say about starting to build your online presence, whether that's LinkedIn or the podcast? What advice would you give?
Well, my first advice is don't over worry about your online presence. Worry about your offline presence. I tried to be the same person online as I am offline. And if you don't have a good reputation, or if you're not a great person offline, then the online presence is it's going to take other people out. It's going to take you out. And I don't recommend it. In terms of creating content and posting, it becomes really easy because it's just like what's happening in my real life and what's happening. So like I did a post the other day about like there's approximately, and I could be way off, but I know that it's at least 35,000 property managers, regional managers in the country. There's probably a lot more than that. And, a small percentage, 1 to 2 of them are going to be hungry and driven enough to do what it takes to get promoted and move up and become the VP or C-suite. And again, I made up that number, but it's just from the people you meet. Most people are not as driven. And I've worked on myself a lot. And so I love the changes that I've been able to make and how it's benefited me. So I'd love to share that with others. And it's amazing. Like you tell people, do you like networking, or networking is great? And then, well, what are you doing for networking? And not that much. They go to a conference once, twice a year, and they stick around with their employees and people they already know, and they have fun. That's their form of networking. Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of hard work. And so then I said like 7 or 8% will be hungry enough to find the help or the advice, the guidance that they need in order to take their career to the next level. And then most of them will either be content, and that's totally fine where they are, and have a great career that way. And others will be disgruntled. But there's so many executives in our industry that started in leasing, started on site, that the stories are enough to know that wherever you are, you have an opportunity. I'll tell you a good story. So when I got into my new position, we promoted someone from within who became the director of just leasing. And I said to him, like, he didn't have any intention in staying very long. It was December 2019. COVID happened. His other plan got canceled because of that. And he just showed up, was good at what he did. He wasn't the most amazing person, but he was consistent, solid, reliable, great, good team player, got along with everybody. And like, as we grew, his position expanded. So like now the property that he was at was doing great. I was like, hey, can you fill in at this other property for a little while? And then we created this position of regional leasing manager. And then that's how we started using him. He became a key part of like when we bring on new acquisition, he was part of that so that we could hit the ground running. And then that evolved, and and then it just became a no-brainer when I was going to move into my new position that he would take over. And the day he started, he was at the same point as everybody else on the leasing team. He didn't have any advantage. He worked hard, showed up, and was patient and in the right place. And he never dreamed of this being a career, but he's been here now, I think 5 years, or coming up on 5 years. And so there's so many ways I think there's a lot of disgruntled people. We all love the underdog story, I think. And I think the reason why we all do is because we all see a little of that underdog in ourselves. We have that untapped potential. We have those doubters. We have those, naysayers, and we have this urge inside of us to either prove them wrong or overcome the challenge and succeed or become something better than either others thought that we could be. But just like the underdog story is also limited, like if not everybody, because we all like and celebrate that happens. But I think really we want that for ourselves.
I know you're a big follower of the latest technology. It's part of your curiosity. And there's so many new tech widgets, tools emerging multifamily and prop tech. NAA was the biggest I think it had ever been for exhibitors in Pennsylvania this year. Are you seeing anything jump out as like just a freight train of a trend that you think is going to revolutionize the multifamily operating side, so property management, in the next, call it 2-3 years?
I don't know that there's anything that's going to revolutionize our operations, but I do believe that like the data business insight category, there's a lot of players that are young and early. And I feel like one or two of those can become a monster in our industry. I'm not betting on any horses yet, right, but it seems like everybody's doing that. And I feel like somebody there is going to, something will explode and they're going to be huge. No, I think it's more than the tech. It's really just switching our mindsets where, like, if you think of, Apple, I think their phones are made in China, or Under Armour, Nike, like their stuff is made overseas. They're outsourcing that. They're not making that. They're really good at marketing. They're really good at design and all these other things. And they don't have to be the one who's actually making the shoe or making the phone, right? They designed it. They did all the technology. And so I'm fascinated by like what parts of our business like we need to do and what can we let go of and replace. Now, some of that replacement might be a technology solution. It might be some outsourcing. It might be getting rid of it. Mm-hmm. And so I think taking a holistic approach of like what's the core, what's essential that we're doing, what really drives our business, and what kind of things can we delegate or outsource or replace with technology. But to answer your question, I don't see anything that is like, oh, this is gonna. I mean, I think that AI for collections, an example, like there's so much value in having a consistent thing that you can rely on to do your collections and not need a person to do that. And maybe that's your answer, but I mean, Colleen AI getting acquired by Entrada, there's others that are starting to do this. They've grown. They're not great at marketing, but they're growing. And we've had a lot of success with a supplier in that area.
Interesting. Well, Moshe, it's been a pleasure talking through all these things. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way to cut through everything going on social media and get a message across to your desk?
To my desk, I don't know about my desk, but to me, LinkedIn is the best place. It's amazing how many people will send you a direct message, but they'll never engage with your post. It's such an easy way to get attention. You like or comment a few times, and often I reach out. I thank people for it. Suppliers, sometimes I'm like, hey, you didn't ask for a call, but I'm curious what you do. Yeah, I make it easy for people.
Okay,
I'm out.
Great. Well, Moshe, thank you so much for being on the show. Pleasure to talk with you, and I'm sure I'll see you at a conference soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Multifamily Excellence, brought to you by With Me. With Me is making lives better every day through convenient, technology-enabled amenities for the multifamily industry and beyond. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.